For 10 years, I visited my mother's grave every Sunday. I talked to the headstone, brought flowers, cried for the woman my father said had died in an accident. But when I was 19, I heard knocking coming from the false wall in my bedroom, and a weak voice whispering my name. "Hi there, my dear ones. How are you all doing today? Come on in, come on in. This is Grandma Hazel's house, and today I'm here in my cozy kitchen preparing some homemade bread for the week." Oh, that smell of yeast rising, of dough baking in the oven. There's nothing better in the world, is there? Look at all these pans lined up on the table, waiting for the dough to rise. I learned to make bread from the ladies at the church when I was very young, and to this day, I make it every Saturday morning. It's therapy, you know? Kneading the dough, feeling it soft in my hands, watching it slowly rise. It calms my soul. But let me introduce myself properly to those of you meeting me for the first time. My name is Hazel Mae Thompson. I'm 76 years old, and I live here in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I was born right here in this town, and well, I've been through so much in this life that sometimes I can't believe I survived to tell about it. But God wanted me to stay, right? And today, I'm here in this fragrant kitchen, making my bread, receiving visits from my grandchildren every weekend, living a peaceful life I never imagined I'd have. These days, I live in this simple little house with my husband, Robert, a good man God placed in my path when I needed him most, and I receive visits from my 3 children and 7 grandchildren. My life is simple. I wake up early, make coffee, take care of the house, prepare meals, and on weekends, this kitchen becomes a party with all the kids running around. They love it when Grandma's making bread because they know they'll get those warm slices with butter melting on top. But before I continue, I wanted to make a special request to those of you watching now. Tell me here in the comments, from which corner of America or the world are you joining me? And also tell me, what time is it where you are? Are you having breakfast? Lunch? Or is it late afternoon and you're resting after a day's work? I always read all the comments, you know, and I'm so happy to know there are people from so many different places listening to this grandma's stories. So tell me, do me that favor? And if you're enjoying this, click the bell down there and subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, because I have so many more stories to share with you. You know, my dear ones, today I wanted to tell you a very difficult story from my life. A story involving lies, suffering, and a truth so terrible that when I discovered it, I thought I had gone insane. It's a story about my mother, a woman I loved so much that I cried for so much when I thought I had lost her, and that God allowed me to find again in a way no one could imagine. For many years, I lived believing a lie, and that lie almost destroyed not only my life, but the life of the person I loved most in the world. But I need to tell you this, because maybe someone listening to me now needs to hear that even from the darkest situations, even from the deepest holes, we can get out. We can survive. We can, yes, find the light again. So grab your coffee or your tea, get comfortable there, and come with me on this journey. Because this story begins way back when I was just a little girl of 9. Playing in the backyard of my house here in Cedar Falls. I was born right here in Cedar Falls on a cold July day in 1949. My parents were Walter Thompson and Dorothy Mae Anderson Thompson. He was a blacksmith, worked repairing farm equipment in a small shop near the old bus station, and she was a homemaker, took care of me and my 2 older siblings. My brother Arnold was 7 years older than me, and my sister Grace was 5 years older. We were a simple family, working people, who lived in a small wooden house with 3 rooms in the back of a large lot in the Grove Street neighborhood, a working-class area here in town. The house was tiny, but it was ours. There was the living room, which was also my parents' bedroom. They slept in a double bed against the wall, and on the other side was an old floral fabric sofa where my father sat to listen to the radio at night. The kitchen was separated by a chintz curtain, had a wood stove that my mother always kept burning, a wooden table with 4 mismatched chairs, and shelves on the wall where the aluminum pots and food containers were kept. My sister and I shared a tiny little room with a single bed. We slept together, me on the wall side and her on the outside. And my brother Arnold slept on a mattress on the living room floor when my parents went to bed. My mother, oh my dear ones, my mother was the sweetest person who ever existed in this world. She was short, plump, with a round face always flushed from being near the stove. She wore her dark brown hair always pulled back in a bun and had small, strong hands that did everything. Sewed, cooked, washed, scrubbed, caressed. She hummed all the time while she worked. Old songs, waltzes, those country tunes that played on the radio. And she called me doll. It was always my doll. Mama's little doll. That nickname was just mine. She didn't call Grace or Arnold that. My father was different. Walter was a tall, thin man with broad shoulders from the heavy work at the forge. He had huge hands, calloused, always dirty with grease and soot. He was quiet, serious, but he wasn't mean, you know? He worked a lot, came home tired, ate dinner quietly, and then sat on the sofa to listen to the news on the radio while smoking a rolled cigarette. On Sundays, he went to the bar to play cards with friends and came back in the afternoon a bit cheerful, smelling of whiskey, but he was never one to hit us or make a fuss. He was just a working man, one of those who didn't know how to show affection, but who put food on the table every day. My childhood was simple and happy within our means. I played a lot on the lot, which was large and full of fruit trees. There was an apple tree, a plum tree, and some cherry trees that gave sweet little fruits in the summer. The neighborhood girls and I played house under the apple tree, made pretend food with leaves and pebbles, and I was always the mother because I loved imitating my real mother, putting my rag doll to sleep and singing softly the same songs she sang. I studied at Cedar Falls Elementary School, which was 7 blocks from home. I walked there and back, always with my sister Grace watching over me, because I was tiny and my mother was afraid I'd get lost. At school, I loved recess time, when we could play Ring Around the Rosie in the yard. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies. We'd sing until we were dizzy from spinning so much. I wasn't very good with letters and numbers, but I tried hard because my mother always said, "Study, doll, so you don't end up ignorant like your mama." She had only studied up to 3rd grade and dreamed that my siblings and I would go further. Our routine was always the same. My mother woke up before sunrise to start the fire, make coffee, and prepare my father's lunchbox. He left early, at 6 in the morning, carrying that little aluminum lunchbox wrapped in a dish towel. I woke up to the smell of coffee and buttered bread that my mother heated on the stovetop. After breakfast, Grace and I went to school, and when we came back around noon, lunch was already ready. Always rice, beans, some meat when we had it, and salad from the garden my father kept in the backyard. In the afternoon, while my mother washed clothes at the sink or sewed clothes for other people for money, I played on the lot or helped her hang clothes on the line. It was a good life, you know? A poor life, but there was love. There were Mama's hugs, there was warm food, there were games with friends, there was the security of knowing my parents were there, that I had a place in the world. But when I was 9 years old, in 1958, things started to change in a way I could never imagine. I had just turned 9 in July, and it was summer, that hot and humid summer we have here in the Midwest. I remember everything was normal, life following that same routine. But my father started to get different. He was always serious, but he started to get even more quiet, more withdrawn. He'd come home from work and go straight to the bedroom, sometimes didn't even eat dinner. My mother was worried. I saw her looking at him with that face of someone who wants to ask something but doesn't have the courage. And then, on a Thursday in August, everything fell apart. I was playing in the backyard when I heard my parents arguing inside the house, something that had never happened before. My father was shouting, and my mother was crying, and I couldn't understand the words, only heard the tone of desperation in her voice. "Walter, for God's sake, don't do this to me," she screamed. And then I heard the sound of a door slamming, and silence. That night, when I came back from school the next day, my mother wasn't there. My father was sitting on the sofa with a closed face, And when I asked where Mom was, he looked at me with hard, cold eyes and said, "Your mother left. She ran off with another man. She's not coming back." I started crying, and my brother Arnold too, and my sister Grace was paralyzed, white as paper. My father didn't explain anything else. He just said, "That's how life is. Now you just have me." The following days were horrible. I cried every night, calling for my mother, wanting her to come back, but she didn't come back. And then, 2 weeks later, my father came home with even worse news. He gathered the three of us in the living room and said, with that hard, emotionless voice, "Your mother had an accident. The car of the man she ran off with crashed on the highway. She died. They're having the wake tomorrow." And just like that, overnight, I lost my mother. First she left, and then she died. Or at least, that's what I believed. My mother's wake was 2 days after that terrible announcement. My father rented a small room at Miller's funeral home on Main Street and placed a simple wooden casket in the middle of the room. The casket was closed, sealed with nails. My father said the accident had been very bad, that she had been disfigured, and that it was better for us to remember her beautiful, the way she was. I wanted to see, I begged, I screamed that I wanted to give my mother a goodbye kiss, but he was firm. "It doesn't open, no use insisting." Few people came to the wake. Some neighbors, my father's boss from the shop, Mrs. Henderson, who lived 3 houses down from us. I sat in those hard funeral home chairs, looking at that closed casket, unable to believe my mother was inside. How could she be? She was alive 2 weeks ago, humming in the kitchen, calling me doll. And now she was inside that wooden box that I couldn't even open to see her face one last time. My sister Grace cried softly, hunched in her chair. My brother Arnold had a hard face, trying to be strong, but I saw tears running down the corners of his eyes. And my father stayed the whole time, leaning against the back wall of the room, arms crossed, face closed, without shedding a tear. When they closed the room and took the casket to the cemetery, I ran after it screaming, "Mommy! Mommy!" But the casket got into that black funeral home truck and disappeared around the street corner. The burial was at Riverside Cemetery, right here in Cedar Falls. A shallow grave in a part of the cemetery where they buried the poor. There was no headstone, just a small wooden cross with her name written in pencil. Dorothy Mae Thompson, 1922-1958. I memorized that little cross, every mark on the wood, every crooked letter. Every week I went back there, brought little flowers from the yard, cleaned the dirt around it, talked to her. "Hi, Mom. It's me, your doll." Today at school, the teacher praised me because I got all the math problems right. Arnold is working now. He got a job at the bakery. And Grace is dating a boy from church. Oh, Mom, we miss you so much. Life without my mother was hard, my dear ones. Very hard. My father became another man. Or maybe he had always been like that, and I had never noticed. He worked all day, came home late, drank whiskey sitting on the sofa, and barely talked to us. The house became dirty, messy, without that good smell of food that my mother always made. My sister Grace, who was 14, took over the care of the house. She cooked, washed clothes, and took care of me. But she was just a girl too, trying to be strong. My brother Arnold, at 16, started working to help at home. He woke up at 4 in the morning to go to the bakery and only came back at night. It was the 3 of us, orphaned of a living mother, trying to survive in that house that no longer had warmth, love, or life. My father was getting more and more closed off, more bitter. He drank more, talked less, and when he talked, it was to give dry orders. Make dinner, wash those clothes, shut up and go to bed. The years went by like this. I grew up in that cold and sad environment. When I turned 12 in 1961, I stopped studying. My father said he didn't have money to keep 3 children in school, that girls didn't need to study, that I had to stay home helping my sister. And that's what I did. I learned to cook, to wash clothes at the sink, to iron with those heavy coal irons. to sew. My sister Grace got married when I was 13. She found a husband and ran away from that house, and who can blame her? My brother Arnold also left home early, went to live in a boarding house near the bakery where he worked, and I was left alone with my father. Alone in that cold house, taking care of that bitter man who barely looked at me. He went to the shop in the morning, came back at night, ate dinner in silence, drank until he fell asleep on the sofa. On weekends he went to the bar, played cards, drank with friends, and came back staggering at dawn. I was afraid of him when he was drunk. He never hit me, but the way he looked at me, it was an empty, scary look, as if he didn't recognize me, as if I were a stranger inside my own home. I grew up like this, my dear ones, in that loneliness, in that sadness. Every Sunday, I continued going to the cemetery to visit my mother. I sat next to that little wooden cross and told her everything. Told her that Dad was drinking too much, that the house was falling apart, that I felt so alone that sometimes I wanted to lie down there next to her and sleep forever. "Take me with you, Mom," I whispered. "I can't stand being alone here anymore." But life continued. I kept growing, becoming a young woman. When I turned 15 in 1964, some neighbor ladies tried to take me to dances, find me a boyfriend. But my father wouldn't let me. "You're not going out. Stay home taking care of the house." He kept me trapped there, as if I were a servant, as if my only function was to serve him. And I obeyed because I was afraid, because I had nowhere to go, because I thought that was my fate, to take care of Father until he died, and then die too, alone and forgotten. When I was 18, in the summer of 1967, my father came home one night with news. He had been drinking, but wasn't drunk. He was in that alert, dangerous state, eyes shining strangely. He called me into the living room and said, "Hazel, you're going to have to sleep in the living room for a while. I'm going to do some renovation in your room." I asked what renovation that was, and he answered dryly, "None of your business, just obey." The next day, he locked the door to my room, which had been mine and Grace's when we were kids, and started working in there. I heard the sound of hammering, sawing, things being dragged. He worked at night, after he came back from the shop, and on weekends. It went on like this for 3 weeks. I slept on the living room sofa, not understanding anything, just obeying. And then, one September morning, he opened the room door and told me to come in. When I entered, I was shocked. The room had shrunk by half. Where before there was space for the bed and a wardrobe, now only the bed fit. A new drywall wall divided the room in half. The wall was smooth, white, without a door, without a window, without anything. Just a wall. "What did you do?" I asked, confused. My father lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and answered with that cold voice that gave me chills. "The plumbing burst back there. It's full of water damage, mold, dead animals. I sealed everything so it doesn't spread disease, and you, Hazel." He came closer to me, looked me in the eyes with a hardness I had never seen, and spoke slowly, enunciating each word. "Never, ever touch this wall. Don't knock, don't scratch, don't touch even the tip of your finger on it. It's full of rat poison back there, and there are dead animals rotting. If you mess with it, you'll get sick. Understood?" I nodded, yes, my heart beating wildly. There was something wrong there, I knew. But I was 18, scared, submissive, and I believed. I believed that man who was my father, who raised me, who should protect me. How could I imagine that the truth was 1,000 times worse than any lie my head could invent? In the following months, life continued in that strange routine. I slept in that reduced room, with that false wall there, always present, always reminding me of my father's warning. But there was something that bothered me. A smell. A sweet, chemical smell coming from behind that wall. It wasn't the smell of a dead rat. It was the smell of medicine, of ether, of those hospital products. I mentioned this to my father once, and he exploded. "You don't understand anything. It's the poison. Rat poison smells like that. Stop snooping around and mind your own business." And that's how the real hell of my life began. A hell I didn't even know existed, hidden just a few feet away from me, separated only by a thin, dry wall. The months passed after the wall was built, and life in that house became increasingly strange, heavy, suffocating. My father changed completely. Before he was just a cold and distant man, but after that renovation, he became a paranoid being, always alert, always watching everything I did, especially when I was in my room. He started locking his bedroom door with a key, something he had never done before. And the strangest thing, his room was exactly on the other side of that false wall he had built in mine. It was as if the two rooms met there, divided only by that thin drywall, and more, he spent hours and hours locked in there. I heard him moving things, dragging furniture, and sometimes I heard the sound of running water, as if he were washing something. One night, it must have been about 2 a.m, I woke up to a strange noise. A noise coming from inside the wall. At first I thought it was a rat, like my father had said, but it wasn't the scurrying of an animal. It was a slow, weak dragging, as if someone were running their nails on the drywall, scratching, pausing, scratching again. My heart started beating so hard that I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. I froze in bed, looking at that white wall in the darkness, trying to understand what that was. The sound continued for about 5 minutes, and then stopped. Total silence. I thought I had imagined it, but the next night it happened again, and the next, and the next. Always at dawn, always that sound of nails scratching the drywall, slowly, weakly, desperately. And then, one of those nights, I heard something that froze me with terror. A voice, weak, hoarse, almost inaudible, as if coming from far away, a woman's voice whispering, "Annie, doll!" I jumped out of bed, heart racing. That voice, that way of speaking. Doll. No one called me doll. No one except... No. It couldn't be. My mother was dead. I had been to her wake, had seen the casket, had visited her grave every Sunday for 9 years. She was dead and buried. It was impossible, impossible. But the voice had said, doll. And it had said, Annie, which was what my mother called me when I was little. I started shaking so much I couldn't even breathe properly. Was I going crazy? Was it the loneliness, the sadness, missing my mother that was making me hear things? I prayed softly, asked God to take that out of my head, and ended up falling asleep from exhaustion almost at dawn. The next day, I woke up with a heavy head, swollen eyes from crying so much during the night. I made my father's coffee in silence, put it on the table, and when he appeared, I gathered my courage and asked, "Dad, don't you hear strange noises at night, coming from the wall?" His reaction was frightening. He slammed the coffee cup on the table so hard that the liquid splashed everywhere, jumped up from the chair, came toward me and grabbed my arm with those strong blacksmith fingers, squeezing until it hurt. "What noise? What wall? Are you snooping where you shouldn't, girl?" He shook me, and I saw fire in his eyes. "Didn't I tell you not to touch that wall? Didn't I tell you it has poison, dead animals? You want to get sick? Want to die?" "No, Dad, I didn't touch it. I just heard some noises, I swear." I was so scared that tears were already running down my face. He let me go with a shove, and I hit my back against the kitchen wall. "You didn't hear anything. It's the old pipes in the house, the wood creaking." "Stop making up stories and mind your own business." He grabbed his lunchbox and left, slamming the door so hard that the window panes shook. After that day, I was afraid to even breathe near that wall. But the noises continued. Every night, scratching, pausing, scratching. And sometimes that weak voice, "Doll, help, doll." I covered my ears with the pillow, prayed out loud to muffle the sound, but nothing worked, and worst of all was the smell. That sweet chemical smell coming from the wall got stronger. Smell of ether, of medicine, of hospital. I opened the bedroom window, let the cold summer night breeze in, but the smell wouldn't leave. My father started watching me all the time. If I stayed too long in the room, he knocked on the door. "What are you doing in there?" If I got close to the wall to make the bed, he appeared at the door with that crazy look. "Get away from that wall. How many times do I have to tell you?" Once he caught me with my ear against the dry wall. I was trying to understand where the noises were coming from, and he slapped me in the face so hard I fell to the floor. "Don't I have any say in this house? Don't I? You want to die like your mother died?" That slap was the first. But it wasn't the last. My father started hitting me, with his hand, with his belt, with whatever he had in his hand. Always when I disobeyed, and disobeying, to him, was anything. Taking too long to make lunch, forgetting to wash a shirt, looking at the wall in my room. He drank more and more, came home drunk and violent, yelled at me, called me stupid, useless, said I was good for nothing, that I was a burden in his life. I lived in a constant state of terror. Terror of my father, terror of the noises from the wall, terror of going insane. I had no one. My sister Grace had moved to another city with her husband. My brother Arnold barely showed up. And the neighbors were afraid of my father. He had a reputation as a fighter, a drunk, a dangerous man. Nobody interfered in his life. I tried once to ask for help. It was on a Saturday afternoon when I went to the corner store to buy bread. The store owner, Mrs. Patterson, a plump and kind lady who had known me since childhood, saw the purple marks on my arm and asked, "Dear, what an ugly bruise is that? Did you fall?" I almost told her. The words were on the tip of my tongue. My father hit me. And there's something strange in my house, something in the wall of my room. I hear voices, I hear scratching, and my father goes crazy if I get close. But before I spoke, I looked through the store window and saw my father standing on the sidewalk across the street, looking straight at me. He was watching me. I swallowed the words, smiled at Mrs. Patterson and said, "Oh, it was nothing, Mrs. Patterson. I hit it accidentally on the door frame." I took the bread and left. When I passed my father on the street, he didn't say anything. He just followed me home, came in behind me, locked the door, and gave me such a beating that I couldn't get out of bed properly for 3 days. "You were going to talk to the neighbor, you snake? You think you're going to turn me in? Think they'll believe you? A crazy girl who hears voices in walls?" He laughed while he hit me. Laughed, as if it were funny. "Nobody's going to believe you. Nobody. You're nothing. You're worth nothing." And he was right. I was nothing. I was just an 18-year-old girl, alone, scared, living in a house where the walls whispered names during the night, where the smell of medicine hung in the air like a toxic cloud, where my own father had turned into a monster I no longer recognized. I spent my days doing housework like a robot, without thinking, without feeling. And I spent my nights awake, looking at that wall, listening to those noises, that hoarse and desperate voice calling "doll, doll, doll," and wondering if I would ever have the courage to find out what was hidden there, or if I would die in that house, insane and alone, never knowing the truth. But the truth, my dear ones, has a way of coming to light. It always does. And when it appeared in my life, it was in such a horrible, shocking way that it changed everything forever. It was on a Friday in March 1968 that everything reached its limit. I had just turned 18 in July of the previous year, and it had been almost 6 months since I had been living in that hell, hearing noises in the wall, getting beatings from my father, living in fear 24 hours a day. On that specific Friday, my father came home from work earlier than normal, already half drunk, with red eyes and that strong smell of cheap whiskey. He came into the house, kicking the door, threw the empty lunchbox in the kitchen sink, and yelled, "Where's the food? I work like a condemned man, and when I get home there's not even food on the table?" I was just finishing making the rice. I had been delayed because the wood was wet and the fire wouldn't catch properly. But for him, the explanation didn't matter. He grabbed my arm, dragged me to the stove, and shoved my hand near the hot pot. "You're useless, just like your mother was, useless and good for nothing." Those words. Just like your mother was. Something broke inside me at that moment. My mother wasn't useless. My mother was the hardest working, most loving, most perfect person who ever existed. And he spoke of her with contempt, as if she had been worth nothing, as if her years of dedication meant nothing. I looked at him, at that man who was my father, and for the first time in my life, I felt anger. Real anger. It wasn't fear anymore, it was pure hatred. "Don't talk about my mother like that," I said, quietly but firmly. My own voice scared me. I had never confronted him before. He let go of my arm, took 2 steps back, and looked at me as if he were seeing a ghost. For a second, just a second, I saw something pass through his eyes. Fear, perhaps? Guilt? But soon his face hardened again, and he came at me with his fist clenched. "You're going to learn to respect your father." He punched me in the shoulder, throwing me against the wall, and then another in the arm, and another. I fell to the floor, curled up trying to protect myself, and he continued, kicked my back, my leg, shouting horrible things I don't even want to repeat. When he finally stopped, I was bleeding from the mouth, my whole body hurting, barely able to breathe. He spat on the floor near me and said, "Today's Friday. I'm going out to play cards with the guys at Joe's bar. When I come back tomorrow morning, this house better be spotless, the food better be ready, and you better have learned to keep quiet." He took his wallet, put it in his pocket, and left slamming the door. I stayed there, fallen on the kitchen floor, for I don't know how long. It could have been 10 minutes, it could have been an hour. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the pain in my soul. I was completely destroyed, broken inside. I thought about getting up, going to the kitchen, taking the sharpest knife we had, and ending it all at once. Why keep living, I thought. Why? To get beaten every day? To hear voices in the wall and think I'm going crazy? To be this man's slave until he dies, or until I die first? But then, in the middle of all that darkness, I heard it again. The voice. Coming from the wall in my room. Clearer this time, more desperate. "Doll, help me. Please, doll." And something clicked in my head. That voice wasn't my imagination. It wasn't madness. It was real. There was someone there, someone alive, someone needing help. And somehow, that someone knew my childhood nickname. That someone knew me. I dragged myself to my room, my whole body hurting, and put my ear against the wall. "Is someone there?" I whispered. Silence. I waited, and then 3 weak knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was responding. My heart started beating so hard I thought it would explode in my chest. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. More silence. And then the voice again, so weak I could barely hear. "Your mother. It's me. Your mother." My world stopped. The air left my lungs. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. My mother was dead. Dead and buried for 10 years. I had been to the wake, had seen the casket, had visited her grave every week. But that voice, that way of speaking. Doll. I started crying, shaking, banging my hands on the wall. "Mom? Mom, is that you? Is it really you?" More knocking on the other side. Weaker now, as if the person were losing strength. And then I understood everything. My father had lied. He had lied about everything. He hadn't killed my mother, at least not in the accident he invented. He had done something worse, much worse. He had imprisoned her, hidden her. There, behind that wall, just a few feet from me, for all these years. The rage I felt at that moment was so great I can't even describe it. It was as if a fire had been lit inside me, burning all the fear, all the submission, all the tiredness. I wasn't going to let her die there. I wasn't. Even if I died trying, I was going to get my mother out of that place. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of the room, leaning against that cursed wall, talking softly with my mother. She could barely speak. Her voice was weak, dragged, as if she were very drugged. He gives me medicine, every day, pills. I can't think straight, she whispered. He said, "You died, that you were a baby, and died." I believed him. My father had lied to both of us. He had told me that my mother had run away and died in an accident, and he had told her that I had died as a baby. All lies. All to keep her trapped there, to have total control over her, so no one would suspect. The monster had created a prison inside his own house, had kept my mother like she was an animal, drugged with medicine so she wouldn't scream, trapped, alone, for an entire decade. "Mom, I'm going to get you out of there," I promised, tears running down my face. "I swear to God I'm going to get you out of there. Just wait a little longer, just a little longer." She gave 3 weak knocks on the wall. She had understood. When Saturday morning dawned, my body was sore from the beating, but my mind was clear for the first time in months. I knew what I had to do. My father always went out on Friday nights to play cards and came back only on Saturday afternoon or evening, depending on how much he won or lost in the game. I had time. Not much, but I had it. I went to the kitchen and looked at the cabinet where my father kept the tools. He always locked it with a padlock, always. But that day, in the rush to leave, drunk and angry, he had forgotten to lock it. The padlock was hanging open on the ring. It was a sign. It had to be. God was giving me a chance. I opened the cabinet with trembling hands. Inside, there was a hammer, pliers, screwdrivers, and a hacksaw. I took the hammer and hacksaw, went back to the room, locked the door from inside, and dragged the bed until it was against the opposite wall. I needed space to work. I stood in front of that smooth drywall for a few seconds, breathing deeply, asking God for strength. And then I put my ear one last time and whispered, "Mom, I'm going to make a hole here. Stay away from this part, okay? Stay away so you don't get hurt." 3 knocks in response. I took the hacksaw and started cutting the drywall. My heart was beating so hard I could hear its sound echoing in my ears. The blade went in easily. The drywall was thin, as I suspected. I started making a square, cutting slowly to not make too much noise, even knowing there was no one home besides me and her. When I finished cutting the 4 sides, I took the hammer and started hitting lightly on the edges. The piece of drywall started to give way. A few more hits and it came loose, falling into the dark space. I had opened a hole the size of my hand. I took the old flashlight I used when the power went out, pointed it inside, and looked. What I saw in that hole made me fall to my knees. It wasn't plumbing. There was no dead rat. There was no water damage. It was a room. Small, narrow, dark. An old, dirty mattress on the floor, and chained by the ankle, with a chain attached to a ring welded to the wall, was a woman. She was so thin that her bones showed through her skin. Her hair, which must have been brown once, was all white and disheveled, falling over her shoulders like dry straw. Her skin was pale, almost transparent, full of sores. She wore an old, filthy, torn nightgown, and around her, scattered on the floor, were dozens of medicine bottles, heavy sedatives, tranquilizers. He kept her drugged all the time so she wouldn't scream, so no one would find out. When the flashlight beam illuminated her face, she raised one hand to protect her eyes. She hadn't seen light for so long it hurt. And then she looked at me. And even destroyed, even unrecognizable, even transformed into a shadow of what she had been, I recognized those eyes. They were my mother's eyes. The mother I thought had been dead for 10 years. The mother I visited at the cemetery every Sunday. The mother I cried for, that I missed, that I loved every day of my life. "Mom," I whispered, tears falling uncontrollably. "Mom, it's me. It's Hazel, your doll. I'm here. I'm going to get you out of there. She stretched her trembling hand toward the hole, trying to reach me, and whispered with the most broken voice I've ever heard in my life. My doll. My little doll. You're alive. You're alive. And at that moment, my dear ones, I knew there was no going back. I was going to destroy that wall. I was going to carry my mother in my arms. I was going to take her away from that hell. Even if it cost me my life, I was going to save her. Because she had waited for me. For 10 years, trapped in that dark hole, drugged, alone, she had waited. And now I had found her, and nothing, absolutely nothing in this world was going to stop me from freeing her. I didn't think twice. I grabbed the hammer with both hands and started hitting that wall with all the strength I had. The noise didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered anymore. My mother was there, alive, and I was going to get her out of that hell even if it was the last thing I did in my life. The drywall started to give way, pieces falling into the dark room. I hit, tears streaming down, my heart beating in my chest like a war drum. "Mom, get away from there! Move, so pieces don't fall on you!" I shouted, and continued destroying that cursed wall. It took about 15 minutes to open a hole big enough for me to get through. When I finished, I was sweaty, my hands trembling, my whole body still hurting from the beating, but I didn't feel anything. I only felt a desperate urgency to get in there and get my mother. I threw the flashlight inside first, to illuminate. Then I stuck my head in, my shoulders, and squeezed through the hole. I fell to my knees on the other side, on the cold, dirty floor of that prison. The smell was horrible. Smell of urine, of filth, of medicine, of human body without a bath for too long. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it to where my mother was. She had dragged herself to the farthest corner, curled up, with her thin arms covering her face. The chain on her ankle clinked when she moved. "Mom," I said, approaching slowly so as not to scare her. "It's me, Mother, your doll. I came to get you out of here." She slowly lowered her arms and looked at me. In that weak light of the flashlight, I saw tears streaming down her face. That face that had been full, rosy, beautiful, and now was just skin and bone. "My little doll," she whispered, and extended her trembling hands to me. I threw myself into her arms, hugged that fragile body, and we both cried. We cried for the 10 lost years, for the suffering, for the pain, for the lie. I felt her bones under her skin, felt her trembling, too weak to even hug me properly. "I'm going to get you out of here, Mom. I promise. I'm going to take you far away from this monster." I looked at the chain that held her ankle. It was a thick metal chain, welded to a ring nailed to the wall. On her ankle was a metal shackle that closed with a padlock. I pulled, tried to force it, but it was no use. It was too strong. "Mom, is there a key? Do you know where the key to this chain is?" She shook her head slowly, confused, drugged. He keeps it in his room, in a little box, on top of the wardrobe. His room. I was going to have to go into my father's room, look for the key, hope he didn't arrive while I was in there. But there was no other option. "Wait here, Mom. I'll be right back." I went back through the hole in the wall, came out to my room, ran across the living room, and stopped at my father's bedroom door. It was locked. He always locked it. Always. I thought quickly. The window. His room had a window that faced the backyard. I ran outside, picked up a brick from the ground, and threw it at the glass. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the entire house, but there was no one to hear. I removed the shards carefully, climbed through the window, and fell into his room. It was a simple room. Single bed, old wooden wardrobe, a nightstand with an ashtray full of cigarette butts. The smell of whiskey and sweat was embedded in everything. I climbed on a stool, reached the top of the wardrobe, and felt with my hand until I felt a small metal box. I climbed down, opened it. Inside there was money, some old documents, and 3 small keys. I took all three and ran back. I went back through the hole, entered the prison again, knelt beside my mother, and started trying the keys in the padlock on the shackle. The first one didn't go in. The second one didn't either. "Please, God, please," I prayed softly. The third key went in. I turned it. Click. The padlock opened. I removed the shackle from her ankle carefully. The skin underneath was raw, full of infected sores from being trapped there for so long. "I did it, Mom. I did it." I was crying with joy, shaking all over. "Now let's get out of here. Come with me." I tried to help her get up, but her legs didn't work properly. She had been lying down for so long, sedated, without moving, that her muscles had atrophied. She tried to take a step and fell. I can't walk. I'm sorry, doll." "It's okay, Mom. I'll carry you." And that's what I did. She was so light, so thin, that she seemed like a child in my arms. I lifted her, holding her as you hold a baby, and started walking back to the hole in the wall. It was difficult to pass with her in my arms, but I managed. I crossed my room, crossed the living room, opened the front door of the house. The sunlight hit my mother's face, and she moaned in pain, turning her face to my chest. She hadn't seen the sun for 10 years, 10 years locked in that dark hole. I covered her face with a cloth I grabbed from the kitchen and started running, or rather, walking as fast as I could with her in my arms. The closest house was Mr. Johnson's, a widowed gentleman who lived 3 houses down. He was quiet, somewhat closed off, but not mean. I knocked on his door with my foot because I had no free hand. "Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, open the door for God's sake." The door opened, and he appeared in pants and undershirt, looking sleepy. He must have been taking a Saturday afternoon nap. When he saw me there, holding that skeletal and dirty woman in my arms, his eyes widened. "Hazel? What is this? Who is this woman?" I was crying so much I could barely speak. "It's my mother, Mr. Johnson. It's my mother. My father. My father locked her up 10 years ago behind the wall in my room. I thought she had died. Everyone thought so, but she was there, trapped, drugged. For God's sake, help me. Call the police. Call now." Mr. Johnson stood there for a few seconds, processing what I had said, with the face of someone who couldn't believe what they were hearing. But then he saw my mother's condition, the sores, the extreme thinness, the chain that had marked her ankle, and understood that it was true. Come in, lay her on the sofa." He pulled me inside, and I carefully laid my mother on his old sofa. He grabbed a blanket and covered her. "I'm calling the police now, right now." He had a phone, one of the few houses in the neighborhood that had one. He dialed the police station, spoke with the sheriff, explained the situation. Meanwhile, I stayed kneeling beside the sofa, holding my mother's hand, stroking her white hair, whispering, "It's over, Mom. It's over. You're free. You're saved. I'm here. I'm here." The police arrived in less than 20 minutes. 2 patrol cars, 4 officers. The sheriff himself came, a tall man named Marcus Hayes. They entered Mr. Johnson's house, saw my mother on the sofa, saw her condition, and were shocked. "How is it? How long was she imprisoned?" the sheriff asked, his voice shaking with contained rage. 10 years, I said. Since 1958. My father staged a fake wake, buried an empty casket, and kept her locked behind the wall the whole time. Drugged, chained, alone. The sheriff clenched his fists, jaw tense. "Where's your father now?" "He went to play cards at Joe's bar. Should be back tonight." He looked at the officers and ordered, "You 2 stay here protecting the women. You 2 come with me. Let's arrest that bastard." They called an ambulance to take my mother to the hospital. When the paramedics arrived and put her on the stretcher, she held my hand tightly, a strength I didn't even know she had. "Don't leave me, doll. Don't leave me alone." I got in the ambulance with her. "Never again, Mom. I'll never leave you alone again. I promise." At the hospital, The doctors were horrified by her condition. Extreme malnutrition, severe dehydration, multiple infections, muscle atrophy, drug poisoning. She weighed 84 pounds, an adult woman who should weigh at least 120. They admitted her immediately, put her on IV fluids, started treatment. Meanwhile, at Joe's bar, my father was playing cards and drinking whiskey when the police came in. He saw the uniforms and tried to escape through the back door, but the officers caught him first. He screamed, kicked, said he hadn't done anything, that it was all lies. But when they took him back to the house, showed him the hole in the wall, showed him the prison, showed him the chains, the medicine bottles, the filthy mattress, the inhuman conditions, he had nothing to say. They handcuffed him, threw him in the patrol car, and took him straight to the police station. I wasn't there to see it, but Sheriff Hayes told me later that my father, when interrogated, confessed everything. He said he had fought with my mother because he discovered she wanted to divorce him, that he got angry, that he lost his head, that on impulse he decided to lock her up, just for a few days, for her to learn her lesson. But the days turned into weeks, the weeks turned into months, and he realized there was no going back. If he released her, he'd go to jail. So he decided he would keep her there forever. He invented the story of the escape and the accident, staged the fake wake with an empty casket, and continued living as if nothing had happened. For years, he entered the secret room, which had access through the locked door of his room, brought food, water, and the heavy sedatives he bought at the pharmacy. He kept her drugged all the time, so she wouldn't make noise. When I turned 18 and started asking too many questions, he built the false wall in my room so I wouldn't hear anything, invented the story of dead rats and poison to scare me and keep me away. But he didn't count on me hearing. That I would discover. That I would have the courage to destroy that wall and free my mother. My father was sentenced to 30 years in prison for false imprisonment, torture, and attempted murder. He died in prison 10 years later from liver cirrhosis, his liver destroyed by alcohol. I never spoke to him again. Never wanted to see him. To me, he had died the day I discovered what he had done. My mother spent 3 months in the hospital. They were difficult months of recovery. She had to relearn to walk, to eat properly, to live without the drugs that kept her sedated. The doctors said it was a miracle she survived 10 years in those conditions. But she survived. And little by little, very slowly, she started to become who she had been once. My mother, Dorothy, the woman who hummed while working, who called me doll, who had a sweet smile and a huge heart. And I, my dear ones, learned that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is destroy a wall. Fear doesn't matter. Danger doesn't matter. When we know there's someone on the other side needing help, we find strength we didn't know we had. And that wall my father built to separate us was the same wall I destroyed to unite us again. Today, my dear ones, I'm here in my warm kitchen in Cedar Falls, the same town where I was born, where I suffered, but also where I rebuilt my life, at 76 years well lived, making these little breads you're seeing here on the table. And you know what's most beautiful? I make these breads with the recipe my mother taught me. Yes, my mother. Because after that horrible day in March 1968, we had the chance to live together again, to recover the lost time, to be mother and daughter for real. My mother spent 3 months in the hospital, as I told you, but after she was discharged, she came to live with me. We rented a small house here in the Oak Grove neighborhood, far away from that cursed house on Grove Street. That house was demolished years later, and thank God, because I couldn't even stand to pass by it. We went to live just the two of us, starting life from scratch. I got a job at a clothing factory, sewing school uniforms, and with my salary we paid rent and bills. It was tight, but it was ours. It was free. It was with love. My mother took almost 2 years to fully recover. She had to do physical therapy to walk properly again, had to gain weight slowly so as not to strain her body, had to do psychological counseling because of the trauma. But she was strong, my dear ones. Stronger than anyone could imagine. Little by little, she started smiling again, singing those old songs while sweeping the house, calling me doll, with that affection only she knew how to give. In 1970, when I was 21, I met Robert at a church dance. He was, and still is, a simple man, a carpenter, hard-working, with a huge heart. When I told him my mother's story, about the wall, about everything we had been through, he didn't run away. He wasn't scared. He took my hand and said, "Hazel, the past doesn't define who you are. You're the bravest woman I've ever met." And there I knew I had found my match. We got married in 1971, in a simple ceremony at St. Joseph's Church, with my mother by my side as matron of honor. Seeing her there, smiling, healthy, well-dressed, holding my arm as I walked up to the altar, was one of the happiest days of my life. After everything we'd been through, being able to get married with her blessing, seeing me happy, it was more than I had the right to dream of. We had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. The oldest, Walter, is 52 today and is a truck driver. The middle one, Thomas, is 50 and works at a carpentry shop here in Cedar Falls. And the youngest, my Dorothy, I named her in honor of my mother, is 48 and is an elementary school teacher. All 3 grew up hearing their grandmother's stories, knowing what she had been through, and learning that we must always fight for those we love. My mother lived with us until 1995. She helped raise my 3 children, cooked for them, told stories, taught old recipes. She lived to see 6 of my 7 grandchildren born. She only didn't meet little Peter, who was born 2 years after she passed. She died of old age, in her sleep, at 73. It was a peaceful, beautiful death, the way she deserved. And this time, my dear ones, the wake was real. The casket was open. I could see her face at peace. I could give the goodbye kiss I couldn't give when I was 9. And we buried her at Riverside Cemetery, but this time with a real headstone, with real flowers, and with the certainty that she was really there, resting in peace. Today, my life is simple and full of joy. I live in this same little house in Oak Grove that we bought in 1975. We paid it off a long time ago, thank God. My husband Robert is retired, spends his days fixing neighbors' furniture, playing dominoes with friends at the little square. I take care of the house, make my bread every week. I sell some to the neighbors to make a little extra money, and I receive my grandchildren every weekend. They love coming to Grandma's house, eating warm bread with butter, listening to my stories, playing in the little backyard we have. I have a little garden there where I plant herbs, lettuce, tomatoes. I learned to love working with soil, watching the little plants grow, harvesting the fruits of my labor. It's so different from that life of fear and darkness I lived when I was young. Today, everything is light, it's joy, it's gratitude. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the kitchen kneading my bread dough, I talk to my mother. I know she's up there in heaven, watching over me, proud of the life I built. Look here, Mom. Look how your grandchildren grew up beautiful. Look how we won. That monster couldn't destroy us. We're stronger than evil. And I feel that she hears. I feel that she smiles. My siblings, Arnold and Grace, we got close again after everything. They had also suffered with our father's lies, had also lost years of living with our mother. Today we visit each other, have Sunday lunch together when we can, and our children are friends. The family that was broken was rebuilt with a lot of effort, a lot of forgiveness, a lot of love. I look back and see everything I went through, the orphaned childhood of a living mother, the years of suffering, the day I destroyed that wall, the fight to recover my mother, the building of my own family, and I know that every scar was worth it. Because I didn't let trauma define me. I chose to live. I chose to love. I chose to be happy despite everything. And today, here in my fragrant kitchen, with my breads rising in the oven, waiting for my grandchildren to arrive for Sunday lunch, I know that victory is mine. It's ours, mine and my mother's, because we survived. And more than that, we lived. My dear ones, if you're listening to me now and something inside you is saying that something's wrong in your house, in your neighbor's house, in the house of someone you know. Trust that feeling. Trust it. I spent months hearing noises, hearing voices, feeling that something was very wrong, and everyone, including my own father, told me I was crazy, that I was making things up, that I was imagining. But I wasn't. And maybe you're not either. If someone forbids you from entering some room in the house with explanations that don't make sense, if you hear strange sounds that don't match the explanation they gave you, if there are smells that aren't what they should be, if someone gets too nervous when you approach a certain place, pay attention, don't ignore it. Because sometimes, on the other side of that wall, that locked door, that basement that is condemned, there's someone needing you. Someone waiting for you to be brave enough to investigate. I learned that courage isn't not having fear. Courage is having fear and acting anyway. I was terrified when I grabbed that hammer and started hitting that wall. I knew that if my father arrived at that moment, he could kill me. But I also knew that if I did nothing, my mother would die there, alone, drugged, chained. And I couldn't let that happen. Sometimes we need to destroy walls, my dear ones. Real walls, like I destroyed. But also walls of fear, of silence, of shame, of not wanting to get involved. Because there are many people trapped in the dark, waiting for someone to have the courage to tear down these walls and bring the light. If you're trapped, literally, or in any kind of situation where someone controls you, isolates you, makes you believe you have no way out, know that there is always, always a way out. My mother spent 10 years believing I was dead, that she would never get out of there, that she would die in that dark hole. But she didn't die. Because one day, when she least expected it, she heard a different noise, a voice calling, a light coming in, and everything changed. Never give up. Never stop knocking on that wall, screaming for help, believing that someone will hear you. And if you're the person on the other side, the one who can hear, the one who can act, don't be afraid. Seek help. Call the authorities. Talk to neighbors, to family, to whoever is necessary. Be the person who destroys the wall and brings freedom back. I look back and know that every second of fear I felt was worth it, because I saved my mother. And if you're going through something similar, if you're scared, if you're in doubt whether or not you should act, I tell you, act, be brave, tear down that wall. Because on the other side, there may be someone who has spent entire years waiting for you. And now, my beloved ones who watched until here, I need you. If this story touched your heart, if you understand the importance of paying attention to the signs around you, I want you to do 3 things now. Don't wait another minute. First, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Why? Because each story I tell here can save a life, can open the eyes of someone who is living something similar. Second, write here in the comments a single word. Write wall if you understood the message, if you promise to pay attention to the signs around you, if you promise to be the person who tears down walls when necessary. I want to see these comments full of that word. I want to feel that we're creating a chain of brave people, of people who don't close their eyes to the suffering of others. And third, share this video. Share it with that person you think needs to hear this. It could be a friend, a cousin, a neighbor. Because the more people know there's a way out, that there's hope, that there are people willing to help, the fewer victims will be trapped in the dark. Do it now, my child. Don't leave it for later. Now.